Stormcast Eternals Complete List Building Guide will break down each trait, formation and unit, not in a simple tier list, but in context. Which unit actually fits which role and in what kind of army. We start with the overall strengths and weaknesses. These are internal stats, a measurement of how well Stormcast perform when they lean into each aspect of the game to secure a win. Melee damage 8 out of 10, range damage 7 out of 10, durability 2 out of 10, mobility 10 out of 10, maybe 9 out of 10. They have some slower units. Arcana 6 out of 10. Their damage, both melee and ranged, is undeniably high. Between striking from the heavens, 14-inch run and charge cavalry, and reliable teleports, their mobility is unmatched across the mortal realms. They have solid spells and prayers, but lack the sheer volume needed for true arcane dominance. In the end, spells and prayers support their strategy, they never drive it. Now for the standout, the one that confuses every AOS player. Stormcast Eternals are not tanky. In fact, I'd go a step further. Stormcast Eternals are squishy. And honestly, that's the only real weakness. Let's understand why. Everything has a 3-up save. They can stack defenses and even bring half a unit back. But here's the thing. Low health completely undercuts those saves. And those defensive layers only apply during your turn. While opponents do their thing, we as Stormcast players have no real way to stop them from beating our units to a pulp. In general, they take less damage than most armies, but that amount is enough to bring them down. And there's another risk, because with great armor comes great rend efficiency. Let's compare a unit of 5 Liberators with a unit of 20 Stabbers and have a look how much damage is needed to bring a unit down. As you can see on screen, even considering the difference in points, the Stabbers clearly got the advantage. The moment we add rend to the equation, the Stormcast shiny armor goes down. And honestly, the only real relevant stats are against rend 2, 3 and mortal damage. And even pushing the Stabbers advantage further, they have the ability to reduce incoming damage. And with all-out attack reducing their saves even further, we should keep this in mind, high saves are swingy. If you're wondering why Liberators, it's because they offer the best points to health ratio Stormcast have. And if they aren't durable, nothing is. Even Reclusians with a 5-up ward cost more points per effective health. How do we cover that weakness? After all, I said it's their only one. Exactly, with damage and most importantly their best feature, overwhelming mobility. Each and every Stormcast strategy is based on their mobility. It's just so cool and lore accurate. Our main focus should be on the opening turns, because at the beginning of the game, armies are further apart. Not every unit can reach across the table, or rather, not every non-Stormcast unit can. Our goal is to hit the enemy before they hit us. That way we offset our lack of durability. That's why mobility has to be part of our game plan. We want a fast game. The longer the game drags on, the less mobility matters, especially in terms of dealing damage. Naturally, once the enemy has charged 30 inches across the board and everyone standing on objectives, distance almost stops existing. We want to concentrate the game into the first few turns. Be first on objectives, strike first and make the battle unfold on our terms. Before we move on to the war scroll and formation, let's go over the system behind them. Age of Sigmar has several core playstyles, mainly 6. If you want a deeper explanation, that video is linked below and up top. Here's a quick overview. Alpha Strike. Low drop, take the first turn and try to destroy a great part of the enemy turn 1. Alpha Block. Low drops, designed to constrain the enemy early and limit their ability to score. Counter Strike. Low drops, with heavy damage dealer protected behind multiple screens. Grind, any number of drops, focused on creating value over time and wearing the enemy down. Castle, stacks defenses and buffs, then projects power over distance. Slingshot, higher drops, buffs a key piece and launches them forward each turn to trade efficiently. Let's understand what types of armies are actually available to Stormcast. A crucial and often underestimated step. Just by knowing which part of the game we need to focus on, we can already rule out certain list types. No grind. There is no way we win that kind of battle by dragging out the game. Any Stormcast list that tries to endure crumbles against true damage-focused armies or dedicated grinders. Alpha Block is also a no-go, because it ignores what Stormcast truly excel at: damage. Slingshot armies aim to generate value through smart trades every turn. They rely on layers of buffs, support pieces, and careful preparation. And honestly, You probably have to be an elf to pull it off. Castling up is completely backwards for us. We want our speed unrestricted, no compromises. Some lists play more screens, but we never invest resources just to be more defensive. That leaves us with Counter-Strike and Alpha Strike. Who would have guessed? Sigmar's strike force likes to strike. That also works perfectly for the accessibility. Playing a Counter-Strike army is both highly rewarding for learning and mastering the game, and surprisingly cost efficient, money-wise. Now that we know what type of lists we're building towards, we already have a much clearer picture of our units and abilities. Quick summary before we enter the storm chambers. Ranged and melee damage are our bread and butter. Mobility is the tool that keeps the game flowing our way. Magic and prayers serve as support. And if a unit tries to be tanky, we stay skeptical. Curious, sure, because we never close our minds to a hidden gem that might shatter everything we've learned so far. Here's the ranking system. The full method I'm using with the Stormcast tome is explained in detail in this video over there. In short, first we decide what type of list we are playing. Then we look through our chosen faction for fitting units, in this case Stormcast. Only after that we do start list building. And that's exactly what we're doing now, sorting and grouping the entire tome. This won't be a stats or ability review. I will show each war scroll or formation in full on the screen and explain its role and purpose, short and compact. We'll also look at when it's worth its points and where it currently stands. We start with the battle traits. Half of our units can deep strike. This means the distance we have to close is about 9 inches. It's a pressure ability. All our ranged units get to shoot first when they pop out of hiding. And every unit with charge bonuses becomes even more valuable if it fits our plan. It also means that unguarded or distant objectives become much more reachable. And it's another reason Stormcast aren't durable. Every unit pays the tax for this ability. It's powerful, one of the strongest abilities in game, and that strength comes with a heavy point cost across the entire roster. Heaven Sent is our damage backup, but also serves another crucial purpose. It lets us create distractions at very low cost. This works especially well with ranged units, since they can shoot immediately in the same turn they return. Against slower armies, we can drop a ranged unit either through our battle trait or one of the many available abilities away from the main force but still in range to shoot. Careful, redeploy the thing. They shoot once, take something down, then bait the enemy forward. Next turn they shoot again with covering fire before being overrun. We then return half the unit with a command point. It sounds costly, but while they are distracted, we have opened space. Space to hit even harder where it matters. In short, both abilities benefit ranged units a lot, more than melee units. Now the damage buff ability, their finest hour. I really like this ability and really hate the flavor text above it, because it is the exact opposite of what it says. In Age of Sigmar, players alternate picking units to fight. This means if I charge with 2 units and activate one first, my opponent can strike back with one of theirs before my second unit fights. We want our damage output as high as possible, so that's the plan. We strike with 2 heavy damage dealers against 2 different targets. One uses their finest hour, the other activates first. And when our second unit is attacked, we use all-out defense. Suddenly, our not yet activated unit has +2 to save rolls and +1 to wound. Both together mean they will push their damage through with ease. And it says our hero phase. So there is no scenario where it's meant to be defensive. Now for our formations. Sentinels of the Bleak Citadel grants a 5-up ward to one of our Ruination Chamber units. Similar to Finest Hour, but this one can actually be used defensively, though not for long. Ruination Chamber units start off quite squishy to begin with. Surprisingly, this one fits well into an Alpha Strike army. Give it to a unit of prosecutors with a 3d6 charge. Move or teleport them forward, charge in, and activate them later. Take less damage because they have a ward. It also tries to hint at a grind playstyle. We'll keep that in the back pocket for now. Vanguard Wing. Teleport on a 3-up. It's unreliable for any major strategy, but can grab an objective or open a better shooting angle. This one serves as a fallback option. It doesn't really fit in any specific playstyle as a foundation. Thunderhead Host. +1 to hit with our Warrior Chamber if we position our units in the right places at the right time, which we try to do anyway. Combining shooting, melee and speed from different chambers is classic Stormcast design. More damage, more good. It fits both Counter-Strike and Alpha Strike lists. Lightning Echelon grants a 3-up strike first to dragon-like units if they charge this turn. This one is mostly mental warfare. The real power is that it doesn't even need to trigger to have impact. Opponents fear the counter charge even more, and it also gives you an extra combat activation before they can respond. It fits every Stormcast playstyle that can access it. Heroic traits and artifacts. I have included the Scourge of Jairan options as well, but since none of them are truly game plan defining, nothing major will change once they rotate out. The way it works, the higher the artifact or heroic trait is on the army type, the better. Artifacts of power. Quicksilver Draft. A+. More damage before the enemy has a chance to strike. Plain and simple. Works in every Stormcast list. Also works if you have some hero that lets another unit fights afterwards. You can give the hero strike first, and if no other unit on the battlefield has strike first, you can pick the respective unit immediately afterwards by the ability of the hero. Mirror Shield. Fits Counter-Strike, Grind, Slingshot and Castle. Loses value the closer you want to be to your opponent. It can work on star drakes, but Quicksilver's strike first effect is almost always better. Null Pendant. Just don't. Banner of Sigma. Works in most lists except Alpha Strike. Sigil of Mordor. No commands or rampages. On a 3+ roll. The 3+ roll cuts its value far too much. Technically it fits every playstyle, but poorly. Beacon of Azure. Fits any playstyle. Perfect value. Reliable in every list. Heroic traits. Shock and Awe. Strong all-rounder. Solid in every playstyle. Staunch Defender. Skip it. Envoy of the Heavens. Great in all playstyles except Alpha Strike, because you might play the first 3 turns without it. Legendary Tenacity. Rough pick. The 3+ trigger makes it unreliable. You can't optimize around a 1/3 fail chance, but sometimes the most meaningful option. Hour of Glory. Hard to kill dragon, but only in your turn. Huge letdown. Fits no playstyle. Intense Piety. Again, the 3+ ruins it. The ability's range and timing are just too weak to be on a 3+. Let's talk about the spell and prayer lores. Of course, there is no choice in the lores, but we can still evaluate how important they are for each playstyle. In general, the more we front load our strategy, the less we need spells and prayers. Their manifestation lore is unfortunately very bad. Partially fun, but just not better than the 3 generic ones. Before we talk about units, we do have to understand what good actually means. Sometimes our plan needs a very specific piece. Let's say we are running a mostly warrior chamber melee force, for example Annihilators, Stormstrike Paladors and similar, and we need a fast non-warrior unit to give them +1 to hit. That unit needs to be cheap and quick enough to reach the action, but it also shouldn't take up a slot in the heavens, since those are reserved for our other units. Prosecutors fit that role perfectly. At that point, the question isn't whether they cost 120, 140 or even 180 points. Their impact, a 32-inch bubble of +1 to hit, is absolutely worth it. So even bad units can become good in the right list, almost regardless of their points. Almost. And just to be clear, I'm not saying prosecutors are bad. They're simply a great example of how a unit's value depends on context. Alright friends, enough foreplay. Let's go for the main event. Or was list building the main event and this is still foreplay? Who knows, who cares, war scroll time. I will drop each war scroll on the screen and explain its role. No long unit or ability reviews here. We will cover purpose first, then points, and roughly where each unit becomes worth its costs. So you can use this guys even after the next battle scroll. Celestant Prime. A pure damage dealer with 2 key roles. First, you can include all units in his regiment, no restrictions. Second, his power doesn't diminish unless he's killed, and there's real value in that consistency. Yes, his raw damage is a bit low compared to a reinforced hammer, but actually very good compared to non-reinforced ones. But unlike multi-model units, his output stays full, as long as he's alive. Currently at 270 points. If he ever drops to 250, he starts to become a good assassin. Yndrasta. Same story, but more efficient when dropping from a teleport or the heavens. Her 60mm base makes her an excellent assassin, perfect for picking off small heroes or weakened monsters. At 290, she's overpriced, but like Prime, her main value lies in unlocking all units and being able to activate after taking damage while still fighting at full strength. Crossing the 250 mark would really bring out her beauty on the table more. Karazai. Pure damage dealer and another unit that brings access to all Stormcast options. His only real sin is the base Games Workshop gave him, a 160mm pie plate for a melee only monster. We put him in our fast hammer category. At 460 points, he's still a bit overpriced. Drop him to 430 and he is game. Krondys. Finally a different kind of hero, our toolbox. Given the manifestation lore that best matches your chosen playstyle. Morbid. And he opens up access to every unit option. 540 points is about okay. The real question is whether he fits any Stormcast playstyle, which he normally doesn't. Therefore, his real point value should be about 510. But if he fits, he is good, because he has a specific purpose. Iridan. Battletome version. Unfortunately, a pointless model right now. You'll never realistically fit him into a list unless he drops under 200 points. And even then, only if you specifically want his Bring All Units ability. Iridan, Scourge of Jiren version. Completely different story. He's more like the Primer Indrastra, a mobile damage piece, but with an added layer of utility as a priest. At 320 points, he's a bit too expensive, since he doesn't strongly enhance any single direction of your force. At 300 or lower, he'd be a very solid toolbox pick. Ionis Cryptborn now carries the Ruination Chamber ability and the keyword, a powerful, reliable buff piece. He's still a bit overpriced at 380, but at 350 he becomes a cost-efficient choice. But his true flaw is that he becomes better the longer the game drags on. Well, we know we don't want that. Neve and the Black Talons. First things first. The entire Vanguard wing got nerfed. From now on, the change will be shown a few seconds after the original wall scrolls on the screen and be accompanied by this sound. Their passive became a once per turn army ability in your hero phase. A single Vanguard Chamber unit can run, charge or retreat and shoot in your turn. Because of that, the whole Neve gang is mostly useless outside their Regiment of Renown, which unfortunately isn't available to Stormcast. Also, 300 points is way too high. Give me the Black Talons for 250 and we're talking. Bastian Kartalos, pure pressure energy. He moves our non-deep strike infantry forward. Think prosecutors, ranged units, even the Celestant Prime. He recently dropped down to 220 points, which feels just right, especially since he also brings access to all units. Vanda's Hammerhand, a great unit overall. Solid utility, brings both Extremist and Warrior Chamber units and grants +1 to units like Annihilators. The only issue is his cost. At 170 points, he's hard to justify. Drop him below 150 and he'd become a very viable choice. Gardas Steel So looks good at first glance, but performs often poorly in practice. His 6-inch buff range restricts your game plan often more than it helps. Here is the core issue. Dropping him from Azure to buff multiple units is difficult. You usually don't want to deploy everything in one spot. If he ends up buffing only 1 or 2 units, you would get more value just by bringing additional damage instead. And remember, Stormcast bases are massive. You don't want to line units behind him just to get a bonus, only to fail charges afterwards. His ward only lasts until the end of the turn. He charged, so basically until before it's relevant. Look at Gardas at this angle. He amplifies damage and consistency better than a priest, because he doesn't have to roll for the buffs, but only get them once. Tornus the Redeemed unlocks all units and enables a more defensive playstyle, which usually isn't ideal for Stormcast. He shines only when your opponent fails to finish off your deceptively fragile Ruination Chamber units. Unfortunately, the monster-sized Ruination Chamber units are too soft to reliably survive long enough to benefit from his healing. Lord Celestant. It's already hard to move one move 5 unit into combat. Bringing a second one along is nearly impossible, and his buff simply isn't worth the effort. At 100 points, they're skip. Drop them below 70 and maybe then they'll start to make sense. Lord Celestant on Dracoth. Well, he's a neat model, and his abilities aren't useless. He's really overpriced at 160 points. Unless he drops down to something like 120, we always look another direction. Lord Imperatant. There's really only one list where he belongs, and we'll cover that in detail later in list building, or to be more specific, in building around traps. Lord Relictor does one thing and does it exceptionally well. The best backboard priest Stormcast have. He also unlocks the Ruination Chamber, which matters a lot for the formation that grants Warrior Chamber units +1 to hit when they're within 12 inch of non-Warrior Chamber units. Knight Arcanum, a solid choice, especially along Krondys or even in multiples, and a good manifestation lore. The banishment bonus is really strong, like really strong. Points are solid at 120. Any increase would ruin the efficiency. Knight Judicator, solid damage dealer that also opens up bringing multiple Gryph-hound units. Excellent pick for highly aggressive lists, especially when running high drop Stormcast builds. 130 points is about right. Any increase and we go for long strikes instead. Knight Relictor, the real question, how good is -1 to ward saves? Let's break it down. Against a 6-up ward, it's +20% damage. Against a 5-up, it's +25% damage. Against a 4-up, it's +33% damage. Against a 3-up, unlikely, but +50% damage. The effect triggers in the shooting phase, giving it a 18 to 23 inch threat range. And oddly enough, it doesn't even require line of sight. A priest with a prime tier effect for only 120 points. Excellent choice, even at about 140. Knight Vexillor. Easy to pronounce. The heal happens in any hero phase, so in slightly slower lists, both in movement and early engagement, he works well along Storm Drakes and bigger monsters. But as always with healing in Stormcast, something has to survive to benefit from it. Often adding another layer of screens is simply more valuable. Unless he drops from 100 points to around 80, the screens remain the better choice. Night Quester, not worth it, unless he drops around like 70 points, then maybe. Lord Celestion on Stardrake, brings all units and carries a relevant keyword, Extremist Chamber. His damage is low, unless he's fighting units with 1 to 6 health, peaking against 3 to 4 health targets. The real value comes in a tailored list. His once per battle buff only affects Drakov riders, which limits it, but the range keeps it at least decent. He's a very unique fast hammer with a control twist. Opponents can't just charge carelessly near him without risking immediate retaliation. At 480 points, he's a bit too expensive. Drop him to 440 and he'd become genuinely strong. But let's be honest, Games Workshop clearly wants you to buy Karazai instead. So that price drop is probably never coming. Damn. Drake Swan Temp. It's worst version of Yndrasta. That's all to it. 420 points. Drop him down to 320 and we could consider bringing Templars. Knight Draconis. If you're running a reinforced Stormdrake Guard unit, it's worth considering over a named character, mainly because he can take heroic traits and artifacts. At 230 points, he's overpriced. 200 would be the sweet spot. Dragon sweet spot. Lord Aquila. For those who are just listening, he's the one on the Grift Charger, not Stalker. Huge difference. He brings the Warrior Chamber and Long Strikes, Vanguard Wing units. If you only want those and need a hero to unlock them, the Lord Aquila fits perfectly. His extra teleport is quite handy for snatching objectives or repositioning Long Strikes to force the enemy to split their attention. Currently 150 points are fine, but any more and we go for Turnus instead. Lord Vigilant on Morgrev. There's just nothing here for 220 points. Make it 160 and then we can start talking about how this giant griffin might work as a hero assassin. Knight Azeroth brings plenty of utility, but all on a 3+, which means no serious strategy will ever rely on him. He unlocks fewer units than a Lord Relictor and costs the same at 120 points. Around 90 to 100 points though, he'd make a solid move 12, control 5, flying objective snatcher and battle tactic completer. Lord Vigilant on Gryfstalker, the new one, grants Ruination Chamber units the ability to fight twice. But honestly, how and when? At 140 points, paired with the reinforced Reclusians at 280 points, you're nearly at the cost of a big red dragon or a unit of Drakov Guard, both of which deal more damage up front and don't need to survive a round of attacks to show value. Drop the Lord Vigilant to around 120 points and he would actually be good. There is still use for him. We'll discuss his worth more in list building. Lord Terminus, basically a better Lord Celestant, way better. But that's still not enough to justify 140 points. At 110 maybe. 100 would be the real sweet spot. Okay, that's the last hero, Lord Veritant, a priest who can unbind and provides a useful aura. Not the best hero overall, but at 110 points, she's cheap enough to matter. Sometimes 10 points less than a Lord or Knight Relictor make all the difference. I would love to see her at 100 points, but 110 is fine when trimming a list from 2010 down to 2000 points. Oh my Sigmar, we have finished the heroes. If you're still here, pure respect. Consider to drop a like and subscribe. Finally, non-hero units. Now we group the units into actual categories. Fast hammers, high mobility, good but lower damage compared to other hammers. True hammers, our main damage dealers, if speed isn't of the essence. Assassins, units that deal damage and have good mobility, but aren't impactful enough because they're just too small, even reinforced. Dedicated screens. Every unit can be a screen if needed, but we still want a few cheap units whose job is to stand between our main force and the enemy and get destroyed instead of our more valuable units. Utility. Units with a specific purpose. Sounds vague, but don't worry, this category will be clearer once we see what fits in. Celestant Prime and Yndrasta are already in the assassin category. Karazai and Lord on Stardrake are in the fast hammer camp. Now the first thing in the utility category, the Stormreach Portal. All kidding aside, this terrain piece really flushes usefulness on an entire new level. A teleport with no dice roll. Also 10 health on a 4-up for 20 points. Yeah, that's great. Praetors. They're meant to make our heroes tankier, but they really don't. Even paired with the big dragon, they only add around 10 extra health and have about 13.5 effective health themselves, since a 5-up ward adds roughly 50% more health. But that means the hero they're guarding is more likely exposed. So our 600 to 700 point combo of Dragon plus Praetors has at best about 33.5 health and is likely to be targeted by our opponent directly. Compare that to spending 180 points on 2 screening units, like Griffons. Now the hero is technically squishier, but has 2 layers of screens, making them much harder to charge or even shoot. You will also get to dictate engagement, charging first to reduce incoming damage. 140 points is a skip. For 120 they could be okay with Krondys and Star Drakes. Predators go into the utility category. Stormcast, also a utility unit. Solid shooting and casting. Their spell is great, but with a 7-up to cast, it's more of a nice bonus than a pillar of any strategy. Finally, Aether Wings. They're our get an objective, score a battle tactic, and give Vanguard Wing +1 to hit. They're utility, not screens. Now for the damage dealers. I've run the numbers and sorted them accordingly, but raw efficiency is never the only reason to take a unit. There is more to it. So we'll look at each piece with more depth than just a single number. All flavors of Dracothian Guard. Stormstrike Paladors, both Vanguard Paladors, Stormdrake Guard, and Annihilators. These are our main hammers. The headline from the math, they all deliver good damage for their points. We'll start with Vanguard Paladors. These are our fast hammers. If you bring 1 unit, you want Javelins. They deal more damage without all-out attack and can shoot the screen, then charge the real target. If you're running 2 reinforced blocks of Vanguard Paladors, it mostly comes down to preference. The -1 to wound from the axis becomes handy when you charge with multiple units at once and expect retaliation. But overall, the Javelin variant remains the safer and more reliable choice. When it comes down to Dracoth Guard, the main contenders are Fulminators and Concussors. And this is where raw numbers stop telling the full story. Fulminators deal more damage on the charge, but Concussors can block commands like all-out defense, all-out attack and power through. That usually means they deal more damage on average than Fulminators. If Fulminators get charged, they often do almost no damage and just get wiped. While Concussors, facing an enemy that can't use all-out attack, might actually survive the onslaught. So overall, it's Concussors over Fulminators. But if you want to run more than 1 reinforced block, Desolators start looking very good. With Stormcast Eternal's mobility, you can find a 10 model and or infantry unit for them to crush. Tempestors. Very strong and highly point efficient. Their ability to shut down all-out defense is even better offensively than the Concussor's ability to shut down commands. Their only drawback as standalone hammer is their impact. At 170 points, the cost is fair, but that's the problem. When reinforced, they perform like a versatile 340 point unit, and we want a hammer that delivers more impact per activation. So yes, they're an excellent addition to any true hammer unit, but they fall into the assassin category. Stormstrike Paladors. They have the best health to point ratio. At 190 points, they could fit into a Counter-Strike list as fast hammer, though their points could drop to 180 or even 170 to match their worth. Annihilators with meteoric grand hammers. They bring the pain. Highest damage output, enough to wipe entire units. With ease. Slow as it gets, but the truest of true hammers. About their points, well, that's the thing. They fail to accomplish what they want to accomplish. There's simply nearly no list that really wants them, even though those lists need their damage. But their counterparts with shields are just designed backwards. Even at 130 points, they're still bad, trying to be tanky, but with so little health per points, some random D3 mortals suddenly feels efficient against them. And honestly, what's the point of stacking even more armor on Stormcast? The moment your opponent has the tools to crack it, they melt. And cracking high armor is literally every good hammer's job in the Mortal Realms. Yeah, Sheet Annihilators still go into the tanky category, but we stay cautious. Now the dragons in the room. Stormdrake Guard as main hammers. Their relative effectiveness is low. Only slightly more damage from a 620 point unit compared to a roughly 400 point units of Dracoths. But that's not the real question, because it's all about impact. They reliably wipe a 30 health 3+ save unit off the board, especially if it's split into 10 models with 3 health each, like Chaos Chosen, Iron Jaws Brutes, or softer targets such as Skull Reapers or Iron Guts. Bottom line, when they activate to fight, the impact is massive. So yes, they're a very solid true hammer with mobility as a bonus. We talked Tempestors as assassins. Now let's add some more to that category. Prosecutors. Reinforced. They deal okay damage, but the real value is in the reliability of their charge after a teleport or deployment from Azure. Still, they would feel more fairly priced at 140 instead of 150 points. But either way, they're a very fitting assassin. Quester Soulsworn. Their damage is solid, durability is fine, and turns great when contesting the marked objective. They play much like assassins. You teleport them in to make a charge, but with the added bonus of being strong objective holders. At 200 points, they feel perfectly costed. Any higher, and they'd slip into inefficiency. Vanquishers reinforced as mini hammer. Well, they're good because any bonus to their attack profile scales very nicely. Last melee hammer unit, Reclusians. The short answer, they're too expensive for what they do. 140 points for 3 is just too high. They get constantly charged or shot at, and even with the 5-up ward from their battle formation, they often reach combat with severe losses, which is double bad for them. They really want to strike twice while being a full 6 model unit. For what they do, 120 points would be perfect, though there is some use at their current 140 points. Stormstrike chariots are just without purpose, and basically 10 health with a move 10 for some points. 120 points? Bad. 100? Okay. Below, broken spam piece. Most range units are there to interrupt enemy movement by punishing certain areas and to shot cheaper units off the board to make the enemy commit more with their more expensive units. However, Signs of the Storm, the reserve deployment and all the available teleports in Stormcast lets us choose our targets more freely, so we could pick off softer units and even characters. Vanguard Raptors. Both variants deal about the same damage per point. The Hurricane crossbows hit much harder against infantry, but their shorter range is often the decisive factor. They're more of a combo piece compared to long strikes. At 200 points for 3 long strikes, the cost feels spot on. Range is low, but 110 for 3 Hurricanes is fair too. We use Vigilors as +1 hit buff if we do not run a lot of mounted units. They do not grant the bonus to companion weapons. And also 140 points is cheap enough to count as half of a screen, which is our final category, and weirdly the most important one for Stormcast, screens. It sounds simple, but it is not. Let's have a look at all our options, then how they perform on the battlefield. There is a common belief that good screens should also be efficient in other areas, and while that's a nice bonus, it's nowhere near a decisive factor. Let's take a closer look at our options, and more importantly, when it's actually worth reducing screenability to optimize for other features in our lists. Everything has a cost, and I'm not talking about points. Stormcast needs to deal damage, and screens directly affect that ability. Age of Sigmar, like all Warhammer games, is about epic destruction on the battlefield. Something will get wiped off the board every single turn. We can't stop that ever. But we can choose what goes first. These are our options. We can clearly see which ones make the best screens. Liberators, Vindictors, Vanquishers and Vanguard Hunters use 5 40mm bases. With the allowed half inch gap, their screening length is about roughly 10 inches. With a little positioning near terrain, you can often approach something about 12 inch in practice. Using the same logic, Eater Wings give you about 6 inch of screen, or rather non-screen. They're just clearly out. Gryph-hounds come up on top at roughly 14 inches. Considering our options, it's Gryph-hounds first. Their 9-inch movement and extra 2-inch of stretch are just too good. After that, it becomes points dependent. If you have 90 points only and need screens, go for hounds. Always all of them. Except when you specifically need infantry for list synergy or battle tactics. Then we start to vary. At 90 points, it's obviously Liberators. But at 100 points, things get interesting. Vindictors or Vanquishers. Vanquishers deal more damage overall, sometimes even significantly if matched against the right targets. Vindictors, on the other hand, can get strike first. Sure, the damage is low, but I prefer 50% chance to deal some extra damage over the rare occurrence of an enemy hammer failing to kill 10 health on a 3-up save. That's just very unlikely. Losing a Brute, Chosen or Skull Reaper on the charge hurts enough to justify picking Vindictors over Vanquishers as screens. Now we build some lists. We start by choosing a playstyle. First, Counter-Strike. 2 regiments, high damage dealers, a lot of screens. Since a lot of Stormcast lists will be Counter-Strike lists, we will build some examples. We begin with our damage dealers. 3 strong picks, some faster hammer, some heavy hitters. Looking at our damage dealer category, we go with reinforced units of Concussors, Tempestors and Annihilators. Why these? Because we want to emphasize damage with variation in speed, range and output. Concussors and Tempestors operate at mid-range and hit hard. Annihilators are sent in later or punish enemy advances even harder. These are our nutcrackers. Now we want 3 screens. We add in 3 packs of Gryph-hounds. Just start with them because they're a nice placeholder. You can later exchange them for other units depending on regiment options and points. But now our Counter-Strike core is built. 3 hammers and 3 screens. 1390 points. 610 still open. We got Extremist and Warrior Chamber units to fit in the regiments, and there is another thing. Dracos really need to use all-out attack in combat. It's plus 30% more damage from the Dracos. Both make our choice for regiment leader fairly easy. Bastian the Man Kartalos. Now for our second regiment. We are more or less free to pick any one hero that fits the plan. Bastian unlocks all the needed unit options already. We want a damage buff, a priest or a wizard. The Knight Relictor stands out as both. Reducing wards is extremely powerful, and his ability to do it in the shooting phase without needing line of sight makes him even better. Just teleport or deploy him behind a terrain piece and roll. Points check. 1720. Add in some Vanguard Raptors with long strike crossbows. Okay, from now on we'll just call them what everyone else does, long strikes. Long strikes in, Stormreach portal added. Option 1. Upgrade a Gryph-hound unit to Vigilers. Option 2. Play the Annihilators unreinforced, reinforce the long strikes. And upgrade one Hound unit to something with more damage. Or leave some points for Envoys of the Heavens. Our battle formation is Lightning Echelon, to give one of our Dracoths a 3-up shot at strike first. We give the Knight Relictor the Scourge of Jairan artifact Beacon of Azure for a constant prayer value of 7. Or if that option drops, we give him the Mirror Shield. This last step is mostly about preference, but one rule stands above all. Keep as many Gryph-hounds as possible. We need the screening. A misplaced boost in some other efficiency can ruin the army's plan. Remember, we're building a Counter-Strike list. A gap between our screening layers is far more devastating than our soon-to-be-gone screens failing to win a trash battle against another screen. Let's have a quick look at what we're trying to do with this list, depending on whether we go first or second. Going second is where a Counter-Strike list truly shines, more than any other. Deploy the screens up front. Use terrain to close any gaps. Keep the long strikes in the heaven. Have the Annihilators either there as well in the heavens or positioned near the Stormreach portal. If the enemy advances, perfect. We charge them on our turn. One unit gets Finest Hour, the other all-out attack. Bastian keeps his distance for now. Later he becomes the cleanup crew. His healing and damage output are perfectly for finishing off damaged units. If we go first, you normally know it before the first unit is deployed. We keep the Tempestors and Annihilators alongside and the Raptors in the heavens if your opponent has little or no screens. That way we can threaten a side without really committing. Shift your focus to one side. It helps your screening and maintains safer distance. The goal isn't to rush in, it's to pick off softer targets, screens and mobile enemy units, to clear potential roadblocks for later turns, but not that late. Turn 2 is usually the go-in turn. For Counter-Strike lists, I like the Envoys of the Heavens trait, since we have some units that will die fast, and we're not focused on the first turn anyway. But it doesn't suddenly make our glass cannon units tanky. It's just a solid buff to stack with Finest Hour or all-out defense to help push their damage through. Let's stay within Counter-Strike, but this time focus more on some unusual builds, because well, dragons. Of course it's because of dragons. Nothing is cooler than lightning demigods riding lightning dragon demigods. For every dragon a list, except the Templar. Unless you can guarantee the enemy has a valuable monster hero target, they just suck. Karazai first, because red is faster. Of course, 3 packs of Gryph-hounds. And Karazai fills our first hammer role. Now it gets interesting. Our first hammer is unmounted. If we add in another unmounted hammer, we can make great use of Vigilers for support. We need a unit that helps mitigate Karazai's absurd base size. Our big dragons simply won't reach every corner of the battlefield. Vanguard Paladors fit that role well. Even though they're mounted, their mounts barely contribute to the overall damage. Upgrade one Gryph-hound unit to Vigilers and add a unit of long strikes. We are still missing a third hammer. Annihilators fit that role perfectly. Their 8+ charge, strike last buff makes a unit of 3 excellent as counterchargers or extra damage dealers when the enemy advances. We're at 1640 points. And now we add in the leader of the 2nd regiment. We want a priest or a wizard. So a quick evaluation of our 4 options. Knight Relictor, more damage without setup, though not guaranteed. Lord Relictor, more consistent prayers, requires a little prep time, but gives a big damage buff. Lord Veritant, adds an extra layer of defense against enemy spellcasting. Knight Arcanum, can unbind, excels at banishing, and provides access to useful manifestations. Pick your flavor. It really comes down to what you like to lean on. For me, it's usually damage, but unbinding the right buff or debuff can just be as much of an increase in effectiveness. Hero in, let's say that hero costs 120 points. 240 points left. Now the last unit option shouldn't exceed 220 points. So we add in the Stormreach portal and decide what we want next. Quest Assault Swarm. Mobility, objective control, solid damage and decent health. Or reinforce or add another unit of long strikes for more damage. A Storm Coven could also be useful in this list. They provide solid support, add extra shooting and offer 1 or 2 more unbinds. Whatever option you choose, it's a matter of preference. Even cutting the long strikes for some cheaper unit to fit in a better manifestation lore is valid. Because the game plan with Karazai is, the longer the game goes on and the more casualties your opponent takes, the better. Trading 1 for 1 in points is fine as long we trade it for enemy damage dealers, since Karazai performs best when the overall damage on the battlefield is low. Our ranged units focus on clearing screens. Our Paladors aim to trade themselves for the biggest true hammer of the opponent. Then on turn 2 or 3, yes, be patient with the red dragon, we go full ham. Turn 2 or 3 doesn't mean backboarding the dragon. We keep him on the safer side, but not too far away. That's why we need so many screens. And always behind a layer of screens to protect him from incoming damage. In the next list we want to include a Lord Celestian on Stardrake, short Starlord. I feel like that name has a loser vibe to it. Dragonlord. Yes, call him Dragonlord. Much cooler. If we want to include the Dragonlord in our list, we have to understand what he can do and what he cannot. The 480 points are a big tax for a mix of medium tier abilities. He has the Extremist keyword, so we take Lightning Echelon. His damage profile is fine for a single model, but not impressive for 480 points. And yet, activating him in combat is good, so we give him Quicksilver. In combination with his Rampage, he excels at fighting multi-model units with 2 to 5 health each, and his ability to buff Extremist Chamber units sounds dope, but in reality it's nothing more than a mild damage bonus for a reinforced unit of Dracovs or Stormdrake Guard, since it doesn't grant a +1 attack to the mounts. Which means we want a Counter-Strike style list for him as well, so his shooting and Rampage can be utilized for as long as possible without the rest of the list collapsing. 3 units of Gryphounds. The Dragonlord, a reinforced unit of Concussors, form the backbone, and the unit of Questa Soulsworn. They don't hit as hard as the Annihilators, but they bring mobility, which this army will otherwise lack, at least by Stormcast standards. Long strikes plus Hound to Vigilar upgrade turn the Dragonlord shooting into a real threat. 1620 points. You can probably see a pattern here. Around 1600 points, or roughly 80% of the total, form the core of a Counter-Strike list, the what to accomplish part. The last 20% lean more towards preference. That doesn't mean they don't matter, or that you can just throw in whatever you want and still perform. It means we're a bit freer in our choices compared to other list types, as we'll see in a moment. So 1620 points plus 20 for the portal. And now our options. Magic Focus, Knight Arcanum, Storm Coven, Morbid or Primal as Manifestation Lore. Damage Focus, Knight Relictor, and either more Long Strikes or Vanguard Paladors. Battle tactics for Counter-Strike lists. Restless Energy and Intercept and Recover. Usually something along those lines, because with Stormcast you win the game first and score battle tactics second. Let's ditch the Counter-Strike lists and embrace utter madness. Krondys. I dare to say castle. Trying to build a Stormcast castle with Krondys in the middle is like a vegan at Oktoberfest. Soon drunk and hungry. Well, sounds like anyone at Oktoberfest, to be honest. My point is this: everything around him wants to bash the enemy hard and fast, while he wants to bash them slowly, casting manifestations, generating value over time, whittling down the enemy before finally diving into melee. Between Krondys' casting bonus and his spell, we want to build a list that pressures over distance and punishes enemy advances. But unlike a Counter-Strike list, we emphasize less on raw damage and more on staying power, resource management and trading up. Keeping Krondys isn't the goal, it's about keeping the enemy busy, which naturally makes Krondys safer during the first few turns. Our setup is simple: 1 layer of screens, 1 layer of something durable, then Krondys and a reinforced long strikes in the middle. The long strikes provide the necessary damage over distance and act as real hammers with the -1 to save rolls from Krondys' spell. With Krondys we choose Morbid Conjuration. Casting Soul Snare Shackles in the enemy turn on a 5+ is just too good, and the perfect roadblock. Since we don't want to send units far out, that job belongs to Krondys in the later turns. We pick the most damaging hammers. A unit of Annihilators does the trick, even non-reinforced. Next, we add a reinforced unit of Shield Annihilators. They bring 3 strong synergies. A great target for Envoys of the Heaven, which we'll definitely take later. They also scale the best with Krondys buffs and debuffs, since they have low rend, no crit mortals and high saves. They're a part of the Warrior Chamber, which will be useful for our battle formation. Their ability to give the enemy strike last has approximately these probabilities. At 3 models, it's 42%. At 6 models, it's 66%. So a reinforced unit has about the same chance to give a unit strike last as a 3-up if they are charged. Now we add Envoys of the Heavens and the Stormreach portal. At this stage, it doesn't matter whether a hero is already included to carry that trait. We'll add one later, for sure. For now, we only need a rough estimate of the remaining points. We are at 1630 points. We pick any priest and give them the Beacon of Azure, as long that's available. If not, choose the Lord Relictor instead, so we can get translocation off more reliably. We'll need it to position Krondys properly before casting. Since we choose the battle formation that gives our Warrior Chamber units +1 to hit when they're wholly within any non-hero, non-Warrior Chamber unit, we add 1 unit from another chamber. Nearly anything goes here. Prosecutors to place them wherever needed, Dracothian Guard Tempestors for extra damage buff, Vanguard Hunters or Raptors with crossbows. Keep it cheap to maybe upgrade the Hounds to Vindictors. Yes, Vindictors with +1 to hit. Cut enough enemy down before they fall. For whatever finish you decide, the list plays like this. When it's your turn, you try to bring out Purple Sun or Gravetide, both if no enemy is in range to debuff. Unless an opening presents itself, in that case you translocate Krondys, you debuff, shoot and charge with another unit. On the enemy turn, cast Soul Snare Shackles and screen until your annihilators gain the 5+ ward. After the enemy army is either spread out or enough casualties have been dealt to ensure Krondys won't get deleted the moment he's exposed, we start to bring him as active hammer. The list is good and there is definitely pressure there, but honestly it's really hard to fit Krondys into Stormcast lists. Then again, he's really fun to play. Before we look at some trap lists and how to fix them, we built an Alpha Strike list. Low drops, high damage turn 1. This list tries to close the deal before the enemy can even move. The key to a good Alpha Strike list lies in delivery. Our goal is to bring in about 2000 points worth of threat to damage the enemy force in turn 1. Vanguard Paladors, Prosecutors, Long Strikes excel at damage delivery. Vigilers can still contribute while holding objectives, and Indrasta unlocks all the options and brings a 3d6 charge. These are our main units. At the portal, now we consider whether we want Guardian Steel Soul or not. To decide that, we think about which units start on the battlefield and which need to be placed in Azure. Remember, space there is limited to only half our units. Vanguard Paladors start on the battlefield, 100%. Long Strikes go 100% in Azure. Indrasta and the Prosecutors, that depends on the mission. So let's build both variants, with and without Gardas. Add Gardas, a unit of Vigilers, total 1790 points. Perfect room for a Priest or a Knight Judicator, plus a small unit of Liberators or Gryphound. A Knight Relictor with the Beacon of Azure is a strong pick. Alternatively, a Knight Judicator adds more raw damage. The list looks like this. Indrasta, Guardian Steel Soul, Vanguard Paladors, reinforced, Long Strikes, reinforced, and reinforced Prosecutors. Knight Relictor, Shock and R, Beacon of Azure. Yeah, recording this one was a long one. Vigilers, Gryphounds or Liberators, and the Stormreach portal. Exactly 2000 points. Battle tactics for Alpha Strike. Whatever involves destroying the enemy is your go-to. Intercept and recover are a given. After that, it's mostly preference. It depends on how your army plays out. Now the list without Guardians. In that case, lean more on range damage, like upgrading the Hounds or Liberators for another unit of Vigilers, or dropping some units for more units of Long Strikes. And now how it plays. If you choose to go first, deploy as aggressively as possible to close the distance. Just be careful. If you're running a Priest, keep the unit you plan to teleport or buff within the range of both them and the Stormreach portal. Focus on one side of the board. Don't hold back any command points. Use all-out attack, power through, whatever it takes. Damage is the key. If you can't go first, deploy so you can apply pressure on one flank. Force your opponent to commit to the other side, keeping your distance while positioning the Paladors where they can still reach the enemy when needed. Remember, this list has 2 guaranteed teleports. You don't need to start. It's called Alpha Strike because we want to be first to strike, not necessarily turn 1. The entire point of an Alpha Strike list is to remove the enemy before they can make a move. It's the most calculated type of list. I mean that literally. Cost, efficiency, value, and worth are almost completely stat dependent. But what about lists that are thematic, cool, and probably more fun? Let's shift focus to some trap lists and how to fix them. Many of you ask about the Ruination Chamber and how to play it, or more specifically, how to not play Vanguard Wing or Extremist Chamber along them. Both topics are often misleading and can easily turn into traps, so let's take a closer look and see how we fix some fundamental issues in these lists. We'll start with the Ruination Chamber. Of course, it sounds easy. Pick the specific Army of Renown, take Eridan and the Lord Vigilant on Gryfstalker, fill the list with units that get extra buffs from the army's battle traits. While that sounds good on paper, this Army of Renown takes much more than it gives. Both the heroic trait and the artifact are underwhelming. The prayer lore is weaker than the standard one, and the unit restriction makes it even worse. But on top of everything, you lose the deploy into Azure, which is the main reason your units are priced how they are priced. Instead, if you want to play a Ruination Chamber army that's still in theme, go for the battle formation and consider these adjustments. Definitely build a counter-strike list. Bring only 1 reinforced unit of Reclusians, but 2 reinforced units of Prosecutors. A Lord Vigilant on Gryffstalker and Gardas. Add 2 screens, Hounds and Vigilers. Include Scourge of Jyran Iridan and the Storm Coven. Round it up with the Portal, Envoys of the Heaven and a Manifestation Lore. The goal of this list is to close the distance, then send in a unit with Strike First and all the Ruination only buffs active. They fight twice and Gardas doesn't even need to roll for his buffs. The Prosecutors ensure you always have reliable targets to strike twice. The trap is going all in on the Reclusians or choosing the Army of Renown. Avoid both and you will have a list that's good, thematic and on the fun side of things. Now for the biggest trap build in Stormcast 4th edition. Annihilators and the Lord Imperatant. Why is it bad to stack up a bunch of Annihilators, the Lord Imperatants and maybe even Gardas? 7 to 5 in charges and pure annihilation on whatever they touch. Sounds incredible, right? The problem is both timing and focus are way beyond reasonable. Everything has to come down at once, which is already an issue if your opponent has any kind of screens. Second, it's a gamble. D3 inches can easily just be 1, and suddenly the entire setup collapses, because your units are just too squishy to stand around for a turn without dealing damage. Even with Gardas, it often gets worse instead of better. Sure, the charges become more reliable, and the damage spikes higher. But where? We need to bring all our units down at once, and it's all focused on one single spot. And that spot has to be big enough to even fit all those units. Most of the time, that list ends up charging somewhere it doesn't want to, or crashing straight into screens. The only partial fix is to run 3 unreinforced Annihilators with Grand Hammers, plus Gardas and the Lord Imperatant, around 800 points total. But then the Lord and Gardas don't buff enough value to justify their cost. So the real fix is just include some Meteoric Grand Hammer Annihilators in your list. Skip the Lord Imperatant and only add Gardas if he truly fits your build. If you like this kind of Battletome breakdown, leave a comment down below and don't forget to like and subscribe. If you want more content focused on list building, check out the video list over there. Have a great day and Sigmar out!